The Espada. There is no doubt they are one of the most popular groups, not only in Bleach but in the world of anime. Kubo did a great job in creating this group, in every way. Their unique appearances, names, personalities, powers and techniques. And moreover guys, there has been much debate about their rank and other aspects related to certain characters within the group. And many videos has been created discussing these topics, each from a different perspective. However, in this video I wanted to give you something special, which is Kubo's personal perspective on all these aspects. His thoughts on the Arrancar arc and how the idea for it came to him, how he created the groups of Visored and the Espada, how he thought about the rank in terms of power and numbers, and much more, such as the concept of the original Espadas, which we'll discuss in this video. So all the information guys I will mention comes from an interview with Kubo that was included in the second data book, released in 2010, just a few months before the Arrancar arc concluded. Of course, some of you may have read the interview in the book, while others may not have. That's why guys, this video will be full of details that some of you might hear for the first time. And the start would be with Kubo and how he developed the idea or concept of the Arrancar arc. What can be said is that the Arrancar arc is primarily built on two important elements, Aizen Sasuke and the Hollows as a species. Aizen Sasuke would become what we can call the arc's villain, while the Hollows, most of them would fall under his control, when he would form an army of Arrancars with the help of the Hogyoku. And based on these elements guys, they asked Kubo, when did the concept of the Arrancar arc came to you? Kubo replied that he doesn't remember when exactly. However, when they asked him about the scenes that appeared after the battle between Ichigo and the Grand Fisher, where the Grand Fisher was shown being treated by another Arrancar. And as a PS guys, these scenes are in chapter 25. So they asked him if those scenes took place in Wikomondo. And Kubo confirmed this. The events occurred in Wikomondo, even though at the time he hadn't yet developed the concept of the Arrancars. He explained that while working on that chapter, he thought about Shinigami with mask and Hollow with mask. In a way, you could say that these ideas were the beginnings of the Visored and the Arrancar concepts. And Kubo confirmed this by stating that he thought it would be interesting for Ichigo to wear a mask and be fought by both sides, as well as the idea of the two parties fighting each other while trying to break down the barriers between them. And these ideas about breaking barriers also served as the foundation for Aizen Sasuke's experiments, where he spoke about breaking barriers to achieve greater power. And this brings us to an important point that Kubo spoke about, which is Hirakushinji. Some of you may already know this, that when Kubo mentioned how he came up with the concept of the Visored while drawing that scene, they asked him about Hiraku, that when you thought about Ichigo fighting in the world of Wikomondo, was the idea of Hirakushinji being a Visored part of it? Kubo said he hadn't thought of Hiraku that way at the time, because Hiraku was originally intended to be part of the story from the very beginning, not as a Shinigami but as a character existing in the real world. And Kubo even drew him in the colored page of the first chapter, as he already had enough ideas about Hiraku to include him in the early story as a transfer student. However, he couldn't find a suitable role for him at the time. So it continued like that until Kubo started planning the next storyline after the Soul Society arc. So at that point he found Hiraku to be a perfect fit for the events of the Arrancar arc. And that's when Kubo decided that Hiraku would become a Visored. And so guys, from Kubo's comments, it becomes clear that certain foundational ideas were the primary driving forces behind the development of the Arrancar arc, such as the existence of two opposing parties with contrasting powers. The Visoreds, who have hollow powers and wear masks, and the Arrancar arcs, who break their masks and have Shinigami powers. And speaking of the Arrancars, this leads us guys to talk about something very important, which is the Espada. According to Kubo, when he was thinking about the enemies the Shinigami would face, he wanted them to be a small unit under Aizen Sasuke's command. And while researching, he came across the word Espada, which is Spanish for sword. And since Shinigami are distinguished by their swords, Kubo thought of creating 10 characters, each with a sword, under Aizen's command. And here Kubo did something very interesting. He chose a specific kanji for the word Espada. As mentioned, Espada means sword in Spanish, but Kubo assigned it a kanji that means 10 swords. In chapter 209, the first chapter where the term Espada is mentioned, Xiaolong mentions the Espada. Kubo made the kanji for 10 swords, while using katakana above it to spell out Espada. And Kubo explained his reasoning for this, saying that he chose the kanji 10 swords because he wanted to create something similar to how he handled the term Soul Society. For Soul Society, Kubo used the kanji which means the word of the dead spirits, while writing its English pronunciation above it in katakana. Additionally, guys, the kanji for Espada includes the number 10, which resembles a cross, giving it a Western flair that suits the Espada as antagonists to the Shinigami. And regarding the first Espada, Kubo thought about it. He revealed it was Ilikura. However, he clarified that when Ilikura appeared, the concept of the Espada hadn't fully formed in his mind. Initially, Kubo's ideas revolved only around Yami and Ilikura. That's why when they stood before Aizen, Kubo depicted the Espada and Arrancars in shadows. But in the next chapter, it became evident that Kubo hadn't yet developed a comprehensive idea of all the Espada. For example, Halibel appeared alongside an ordinary Arrancar, and Grimmjow was shown next to Xiaolong. Even when Xiaolong first mentioned the Espada and their numbers, Kubo drew them as shadows. Some characters like Halibel, Araniro, Yami, Ilikura, and Grimmjow, who was the first one to give a rank, had clearly been pre-designed. And here, guys, we will talk about something very important regarding the numbers and the rank of the Espada. So they asked Kubo about was the numbers and the characteristics of the Espada already decided at that point. He directly answered that he didn't. In fact, it even got to the point where it was possible for Zomari to be Espada number 3 and Halibel to be number 7. And this answer, guys, give us insight into how even Kubo himself didn't have a comprehensive view of the ranking at the time. And this is evident in his explanations for the ranking. Sometimes he said the ranking are based on lethal combat abilities, and other times on spiritual power. That's why when I see people taking ranking debates so seriously, I think to myself, even Kubo himself didn't have a fixed plan for the ranking. I mean, to the extent that even the numbers weren't decided until he needed to reveal them. However, on the other hand, Kubo said he always tries to choose the most fitting placement for each character. I mean each number, ensuring it suits the personality of the Espada. For example, Ilikura's number is placed over his heart, which has significant ties to his character development. Additionally, guys, Kubo mentioned that he based some Espada characters on the concept of the 7 deadly sins. For example, he stated that Araniro is linked to the sin of gluttony, and Xyloaporo is associated with the sin of lust. And speaking about that, he said that initially, there were plans for 7 Espada tied to the 7 sins. However, when the idea of 10 swords came about, Kubo adapted certain concepts and left others for the Espada he referred to as the original Espada, who might still be alive. And the original Espada could refer to the previous Espada, or the first generation of Espada, but I'm not sure if Kubo intended to introduce new Espada characters later, or if it was something else entirely. But as he mentioned, they might have either been hunted down or simply disappeared on their own. So in conclusion, guys, what can be said about Kubo's answers is that it seems he didn't have a comprehensive plan for the Espada from the start. He developed their characters as the story progressed, which is why there are some vague elements like their ranking or the issue of Espada Zero, among other things. But nevertheless, Kubo succeeded in creating characters that will remain immortal in the world of the anime. The Espada with their backstories, personalities, and abilities. So guys, what do you think about Kubo's answers? I really want to hear your opinions. Give me guys your comments and see you in my next video.